Good morning. Thank you all for joining us for the cybersecurity governance, collaboration, and compliance discussion we're going to have this morning. Before I introduce our panelists here, I want to tell you guys a quick story. I started at the state of Nevada. I'm the Chief Information Officer, and when I started, I was the Deputy CIO. And then when I took the CIO job, I always tell the other CIOs that security was not my #1 priority. But when you look at the role of the state CIO, there's a lot of ways to really be successful, and there's one really big way to fail, and that is if you lose all the data. And so working with Chris Ibsen, our Chief Information Security Officer, we've done a lot of things in the state of Nevada to really make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect the data. But I don't want to take a whole lot of time here. I want to introduce the panelists, and then I want to get to some Q&A sessions for you guys. So before we do that, let's queue up one of our AVR questions here. And this is for everybody, and if you don't mind, there's the little clickers there. How would you rate the threat level to your network, systems, and data? Where's the tick-tock? Oh, there we go. Brian, you got one there? Daryl, are you playing? Yeah. Okay, all right. Hi, good. This is good. We want to gauge a thermometer check here because if people were saying low, which some of you did say, medium or unknown is probably even the worst one there. I personally think the threat level to your data and your systems is high, and I think you're going to hear from our distinguished panelists here today that it is in fact probably a little worse than you might even think. So enough about me and the AVR question. Let's go ahead and start off with Bob. I want to introduce Bob Butler. He is the Chief Security Officer, Senior Vice President for IO. They're a privately held company in Texas. He is the former first Deputy Assistant Secretary for Defense of Cyber Policy, and he's also been intelligence and national security for over 32 years in public and private sector. He's a retired U.S. Air Force colonel and a former member of the Defense Department Senior Executive Service. So with that, I'll go ahead and ask Mr. Butler to come up and go through his presentation.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ray. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for the invitation to come to NASCIO. I want to especially thank Karen Robinson, the Texas CIO, for the invitation to come here. After I left government service the last time, I was asked to do a few different things, one of which I had not planned on, but became part of a group of folks we call the Texas Cybersecurity Education Economic Development Council. And I'd like to just spend a few minutes talking about that because I think it's relevant to what we need to do as we move forward as states and as institutions with regards to the threat that we're dealing with. Go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Let's keep pressing forward. So our legislature and governor had the foresight a few years ago to see what was going on inside of Texas, not only within the state government infrastructure, but also within the private sector and in academia, and said we need to do more. We need to come up with a way to bring all of us together, as the theme of this conference talks about, to collaborate and innovate. As a result, in 2011, Senate Bill 988 was passed in the state legislature, signed by the governor, and this council was formed as a key component of the Texas cybersecurity program. The mission you see on the slide, the focus was really to look at partnerships in different ways, and I'll talk a little bit about the work and how we approached it and what the results were as we go forward. 9 council members, 2 from industry, 3 from the government side, to include from representatives out of the CIO's office, Office of the Governor, and the Guard. Guard was a key element as we looked at concepts for citizen soldier and how that fits into a cybersecurity paradigm for the state, as well as academia, not only the higher education institutions, four-year colleges, but junior colleges as well. Next slide. As we started this work in October, November of 2011, we went back in time and looked at what had been done post 9/11. A lot of focus on infrastructure protection. We took the lessons learned out of that and began to do our own analysis and actually more collection private sector surveys in the state, public sector surveys in the state, workshops, and as a result of that collection effort and looking at what had been done, performed a SWOT analysis, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. We saw some great things going on in Texas, but we also saw some challenges. Strengths, we saw some really good best breed practices happening in different municipalities that range from Dallas to Houston to San Antonio to Austin and around the state. We saw a lot of good things happening with regards to not only those particular centers of excellence, but we saw a structure in place that could actually be leveraged in a bigger way. And we had private sector champions, namely in the likes of companies that you're very familiar with. AT&T, Dell, USAA, ConocoPhillips, ExxonMobil. Those industry captains and those companies actually pointed to the real reason for why we were doing this study. It really was about not just cybersecurity, but what is it going to take to ensure that Texas remains prosperous economically and is also growing into the future. So as you might know, Texas very big into oil and natural gas and energy. How do we connect energy security and cybersecurity together in better ways? How do we begin to work challenges that we have with telecommunications as we see energy grids and telecommunication grids coming together in our state? We have a big proponent in AT&T. How do we work border protection? There's issues associated with border protection that deal with identity access and management. How do you begin to solution to get to the next level of risk mitigation inside of that space? So partnered together, we then came up with not only an analysis and a report, but a group of findings that led to some recommendations. And those recommendations are listed on the next couple of 3 slides. The first is the idea of establishing, through the Office of the Governor, a state cyber coordinator. The importance of this particular environment, technologically where it's going, economically where it's going, it became very clear to the council members and to those that we were dealing with as stakeholders, both on the legislature side as well as on the executive branch side, we needed a coordinator to run across not only government institutions, but across the private sector. Next. We also, modeling off of what some other organizations were doing primarily at the federal level, began to see the linkages between economic competitiveness and state security. And here we decided to put together a thought and a concept that is now maturing called BETS, Business Executives for Texas Security. Again, bringing industry captains together with some academia and with government under a limited set of authorities, not just to talk and share information, which is important, right? Sharing threat intelligence is absolutely critical, but actually solution against problems. Modeled a bit after the federal side on the Enduring Security Framework, but BETS is actually one that provides the roadmap, the overarching enduring structure that allows you to continue to grow between the private and public sector. Next slide. CyberStar was another concept, originally modeled off of Energy Star, but really the thought here was to take technology, process, and people, put it together, and continue to raise the bar, not just with big companies, with small companies, and working across academic institutions and government agencies. How do we do that? You start with some type of commonly accepted standards or controls. It could be inside of what NIST has provided, it could be inside of the SANS controls, and to continue to reassess what you're doing and challenge others to do better. Create mentor-protege programs inside that space. Beyond that, we also began to think about linking that in a resiliency construct with what we call the cybersecurity maturity model. What we had been fairly successful both in the state and exporting out of the state, built by the University of Texas San Antonio, to allow us to create situational awareness and to grow situational awareness into more robust incident response in regions connected then to the state level. Next slide. An important aspect of what we were trying to do was to look at industry, to grow industry within the state, cybersecurity, but also to strengthen the industry within the state that were prone to the threats that we were talking about earlier. And again, in the state of Texas, we deal with the same kinds of issues that all of you deal with. It's exploitation, it's IP theft, it's PII theft, it's the idea of potentially what could happen with significant disruption of services, and it's also thinking about, especially on the industrial control system base, what could happen if things got destroyed. So what did we focus on here? One was people, right? The private sector survey came back repeatedly and said the biggest shortfall, and I think you see it in the Deloitte report, is practitioners. How do we accelerate that? Secondly, capital, funds, right? Venture capital, angels, industry, other industry financing and support. We began to think a bit outside the box, leveraging our emerging technology fund out of the governor's office, as well as looking at some of our global alumni networks, Longhorn Network, Aggie Network, where they were, the monies that they had available. And then thirdly, innovation, right? How do we bring innovation? And here we were looking at centers of excellence, not only from the NSA DHS side of the house and our academic institutions, but importantly, looking at industry. And so in the case of Texas, Rackspace, headquartered in San Antonio, has an initiative which is actually spawning some phenomenal results with regards to entrepreneurial innovation, namely geekdom. So bringing all of those ideas together. Next slide. And last slide. We felt the glue to put all of this together was really in the form of an education pipeline. Lifelong learning. It's not just about education and training, it's a culture of learning. So connecting in the high school level our Cyber Patriot programs together with our junior colleges that are working certifications, connecting that into affordable four-year programs that include internships as well as certifications, moving that into competitions, moving people into the corporate world, moving from the corporate world back into the public sector world, helping them to understand the breadth of issues and the depth of issues as it deals with cybersecurity. And then going beyond that to the baby boomers and beyond, right? So our senior citizens need to have an awareness, and to a certain degree, more than an awareness, because they're vulnerable. And so, again, a best breed practice out of Lubbock, Texas, with our CIO at Texas Tech, was to begin to focus on some continuing education learning in that space. I'm happy to take questions in the Q&A, but that gives you kind of a quick snapshot of what we're doing. You can download the report that we produced in December from the DIR website for Texas. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. That was nicely done. Let's go to another question here before everybody falls asleep. Now, it's early in the morning. I just want to make sure we're all paying attention here. Oh, people are pointing at me. In your state, is your IT security, state government only, centralized, decentralized, or federated? Well, I think this is a trend probably in the right direction here. Centralized, actually getting more popular. I would introduce my next panelist here, Mr. Mark Reardon. He is the CISO for Georgia. He also oversees the state's Fusion Center, and he has over 35 years of experience in the computer industry, mostly in areas of data communications and information security. So please welcome Mr. Mark Reardon.
Thank you, and let me just make sure we're specific. The cyber portion of the Fusion Center. Georgia's Fusion Center has been around for a number of years, and it's only been recently that we've added a cyber component. And that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about today and introduce is cyber defense in Georgia, our approach, and you'll see that it focuses on situational awareness. Our program does a lot to try and educate our state executives so that they can make decisions with an understanding of the issues that need to be addressed. Let's go ahead to the next slide. The state's Fusion Center is called the Georgia Information Sharing and Analysis Center, and we start off our discussions commonly with this slide because we want people to understand the cyber responsibilities of the state. And we also want people to understand that we don't see ourselves operating just independently. We're part of a larger fabric across the country that is maturing and trying to help with the protections of the country. Next slide. Georgia's Fusion Center really takes this part to heart. We have analysts who work full-time trying to turn information and intelligence into actionable knowledge, and we find that that is also key. I know in my role I am bombarded daily with hundreds of communications attempting to inform me about what is the most critical things going on from a security perspective. Our agencies get the same type of information, and so does our private sector. But we all have an issue that what we really need are simple statements of what kinds of actions we can take to deal with these threats. And so that's one of our primary focuses, is making sure that we don't just alert people to alarm them. We alert them to give them intelligence that they can act on, and we try and include recommendations for those actions. Next slide. These are the objectives that we stated when we integrated cyber functions into the state's Fusion Center. The reason the first one is underlined is because that's our primary focus at this time. You can almost look at the rest of them as being wishes and desires for our future. The fact is now we are developing our SARS reports, and we're feeding them into Homeland Security, and we're also taking them out to the state agencies and the private sector within the state of Georgia. And what we're also doing is getting feedback so that we can tune those items and try and improve them. Next slide. This is how we laid out our Fusion Center. If you notice, the red represents classified information areas. The concept is fairly straightforward. We collect information, we analyze it, and when we believe it's important, we try and disseminate it out. We do handle classified information within the Fusion Center. Nothing we distribute is classified. So there's a process that has to go on within the Fusion Center to make sure that the information has been declassified properly and that we're not violating any rules in that area. We also find, though, that we deal with a lot of unclassified information that's out there. And the problem we get there is that it's not organized. And so open source is a major input to our processes. You'll also see there that we have the incident response function. Again, incident response in Georgia has been federated. Each agency has been responsible for doing it. That's been inconsistent, and so to develop a more robust ability to deal with incidents, we're looking for the Fusion Center to operate in doing incident response. An obvious issue we have to deal with there is establishing the priorities. Are we into catching the criminals, or are we into infrastructure protection and getting the criminals out? That tension actually normally gets resolved very quickly when we get involved with an incident. Normally, the focus is to try and get the intruders out of the systems. Next slide. These are the current information sources that we pull from on a daily basis. And it's an eye chart, I agree, but it gives you an idea that we're trying to pull information from everywhere. We're getting them from our emergency management people. We're getting them from other states. We get it from, well, you can tell, just a whole lot of different sources. And our function is to take that information and try and fuse it together and do analysis. And a good part of that is trying to give things a probability. It's not often that we can say absolutely this is going to happen when we're trying to predict the future. So part of the Fusion Center's job, the analyst's job, is to take this information and try and determine what the likelihood is that some threat that we're believe is developing outside is going to be coming at the state of Georgia or part of our critical infrastructure. Next slide. So, you know, I'm just going to skip that slide. When we talk about critical infrastructure, we're not unique. This is the same list that the federal government has been using. But we have identified the different entities within the state of Georgia that represent these different segments, and we're developing communications with them. Recently we held a one-day security conference with all their security officers to try and build situational awareness and to get them to consider participating as sources of information. But right now we don't get a lot of information from the private sector. And I know there is a common statement that the private sector needs to be sharing information, but I also understand their reasons for not wanting to. Next slide. So I always get this one. Is situation awareness a compliance activity? And the answer is yes. And you're not done. You know, compliance is not a destination. Compliance is a process, and situational awareness is part of the compliance process that we each should be following. Next slide. So when we're looking for compliance artifacts in Georgia, you can see the things that we're looking for from our different agencies. We're looking for them to have an inventory of all systems. This was a real challenge when I first started with the state. Most agencies didn't know what systems they operated. And if you sit down and take a look at a lot of the different security reports, I'm thinking in particular the Verizon security reports, they talk about, I didn't know that system existed. I didn't know that system could be accessed that way. I didn't know that information existed on that system. So we're looking for agencies to document their understanding of these various issues in this process. And when we combine that information with the threat information, we develop a process for identifying the risks and managing those risks. Next slide. So, taking you back, we see information security as being about awareness. We focus on compliance with FISMA, and we believe it requires an ongoing risk management process, which includes situational monitoring. Our Fusion Center works hard to identify the new threats and match them up with vulnerabilities. But our agencies need to integrate the Fusion Center products into their ongoing monitoring processes and take the actions necessary to protect their systems. And they must continue to improve their security. It's not a destination, it's a continuous improvement process. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Let's get another question up here. All right, state government only. Does your state have a centralized enforceable IT security policy? Well, that's actually a bit surprising. I think the key word in there is enforceable, right? I think most of us suffer that fate. I'd like to introduce our last panelist here, and then we'll get to some open answered questions, so you guys get them ready. Dan Lorman, he's an internationally recognized security leader, technologist, and author. I know he's blogging all the time. I'm getting all that stuff on LinkedIn and other sites as well. He was CISO of the Year in 2008. Oh, I thought it was more recent than that, but 2008, okay. He must have been doing this for a while here. And over the last 25 years, he served in public and private sector organizations, government agency, CIO, enterprise-wide CTO, CISO, and CSO. So please welcome Mr. Dan Lorman, CISO from Michigan. Okay.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. And thank you to NASCIO and the program committee for inviting me to speak this morning. Want to start off just real quickly with some hard numbers and just make it real clear that there's all this headlines we're seeing about attacks. We're seeing them each and every day in Michigan. Millions of times each year. You know, you add all these together, whether you talk about malware removal, spam emails, web browser-based attacks. I'm going to give you a phishing scam example here in a minute. It's hundreds of thousands of times each and every day. So we're seeing these attacks. I know every state in the country is seeing attacks. This is 7/24/365. So this is what we do. And some overall numbers, you can read them about Michigan agencies, number of state employees, which is down, several early outs, business functions, and computing devices. I'm not going to spend a long time talking about our centralization story in Michigan. Many of you already know that, going back to Terry Takai and Ken Tice, and now our leader David Bean, a CIO. We've had, brought together, 40 data centers to 3. We have centralized pretty much all aspects of IT. What you may not be aware of is in 2011, we brought together physical and cybersecurity under one office. So the chief security officer now is over, when the physical side, you think of surveillance, your video, your badges to get in and out of buildings, the guards at the buildings, not state police, of course, that's separate. Criminal justice is separate, but all the physical security protections and the cyber is under one organization, one team, one voice. So what have we done in Michigan with this global threat and this attack? You just heard about Texas and Georgia. I want to start off by just saying Governor Snyder, Snyder came from Gateway Computers, CEO of Gateway, has that technology background. David Bean, with his background in the private sector and in small government, understood the importance of cybersecurity when they first came into office several years ago. In October 2011, we launched what we call a Michigan Cyber Initiative, and you'll probably hear me say this a couple times, but you can go online, hopefully you can see it in the bottom, michigan.gov cybersecurity. You can read our plan. We're about 18 months into a 3-year plan executing that. We were the national kickoff for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, where we brought together leaders from around the country. Governor Snyder, of course, kicked that off, but we had Janet Napolitano, Secretary of Homeland Security. We had Howard Schmidt from the White House, a variety of others to really launch a major initiative 18 months ago. Last year, we did a Cyber Breakfast series, and then we're doing another Cyber Summit this year. What does that all include? And one of the big things you've heard is about awareness and training. And I want to give a practical example of that. How many of you have taken training on cybersecurity in the last year? Raise your hand. Okay, maybe about half. How many of you felt like that training was worthwhile? One. It's from Michigan. One of the things we found right off the top was that we had a training program and it was pretty lousy. I mean, quite frankly, we threw it away. And we started over from scratch and we've now built what we call Cybersecurity Training 2.0. But we heard from our customers, and they said it's old, it's boring, it's out of date, it's death by PowerPoint. This stuff it's miserable, it's painful, and we don't want to do it anymore. So we knew we had to start over. And I'm not going to tell you a lot about that. I can talk to you afterwards, but I just say that we did an RFP. We picked a company, went to commercial off-the-shelf software from a very good company called Security Mentor. It's brief, 10 minutes. It's relevant. It's short. It's fun. And the goal is to really make it engaging and have people change their behaviors and change what they know and how they act around cybersecurity. Guides for government, school, home. state employees. And then our Michigan Cyber Range, and many of you have heard about that. That really, the idea there, everyone knows what a gun range is. The Defense Department came out with cyber ranges several years ago, so we're following that model. But this is not top secret. This is training for technical staff. The governor decided to run this out of Merit Networks, which is a 501c3 public-private partnership. We have a lot of private sector investment in that, but we also have our universities involved. The board of Merit is actually run by the public universities in Michigan. And Cyber Range is a place where you can go to do training, you can test. And I came from an NSA background where we had a development test and evaluation, DT&E, RDT&E, research development test and evaluation, was where all the money was, right? But in state government, we get a new black box and we plug it into the network, and we oftentimes, maybe not always the best idea, plug it into the operational network. So the idea that you can test things, try it out, see if the vendor promises are true, this black box will save the world, and that's what we're doing in the Michigan Cyber Range. It's growing, it's launched, and that's been a big success for us. A couple other things that we're actively working on is our Michigan Security Operations Center. We have a SOC, we call it our Bat Cave in Michigan, but the reality of it is it's not 7 by 24 today. So we're moving that to a 7 by 24 environment this fall. As you've heard many times, and you'll hear more, cyberspace never sleeps. We get attacks it's noon in China when it's midnight in Michigan. So putting new functionality, new resources, new capabilities in that MySOC. The McDirt project, which is a funny nickname, but everyone recognizes McDirt, which is Michigan Cyber Disruption Response Team or Response Strategy. So this is an idea that, again, led by the governor, our CIO David Bean, but really looking at how does the public and private sector work together. So state government, we're very good at fires, floods, tornadoes, emergencies like that. We know how to deal with hurricanes, right? We don't really know how to deal with a cyber emergency. What does that mean? Talking about critical infrastructure protection, we're going to hear this afternoon executive order from the White House, Presidential Directive 21. How do you work with the public and private sector around the grid going down or a major cyber disruption? So we've formed a group. David's meeting with the CIOs of the major corporations in Michigan. I'm meeting with the CISOs monthly. We're building a plan, a Michigan Cyber Disruption Strategy, which has annexes around communication. What are you going to do? Who are you going to call? What are the threats? We're sharing information now. We're actually piloting some things with Homeland Security, both at an unclassified and classified level, where we're sharing between the public and private sector. Building that trust. We've all heard it before. You don't want to meet your fireman at the fire. Your house is burning down. But really getting to know these people and really to work together. We have a draft out there. We're going to be publishing it publicly. We can share with other states in the June timeframe. So that's really an important document for us, our cyber disruption plan. And we are moving forward with that. Michigan Cyber Command Center, that's really bringing together, we talked about the Fusion Center, you heard a lot about that. Our cyber teams co-located in a facility with our Fusion team, with our military side of the house, the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. What about the cyber warrior? What would you do? I know there's legislation out there talking about that. NASI was working with other organizations on that. But how do you work public-private around a whole host of issues? How do you share information? And then I mentioned the cyber range as well. One of the things I really want to focus on, though, and is our partnerships. And I neglected to put our private sector partners. I want to start off with that. We do have wonderful private sector partners that are coming together with us and helping us. So thank you, those in the room here listening, to the others in Michigan. I'm not going to name names because I'm going to leave somebody off the list. But this really is a team effort. There's one thing I would say, the next couple slides I have an example, and then I have a final set of low-hanging fruit recommendations people can use. But the number one would be to partner. We know in Michigan, if we are an island, we will fail. And we cannot be successful in cybersecurity without Homeland Security, the multi-state ISAC, just saw Will Pelgrin, MIOC, Michigan Intelligence Operations Center, our Fusion Center, partnering on things like Michigan has been involved in all the cyber storms and NLE 12. Actually testing our plans, seeing how they work. working with Homeland Security in other states, federal, state, local law enforcement, and others, InfraGard. There's others on the list that I didn't put on the list, but you have to partner. And really, we don't have the resources to be successful. We have to get the best of what they do, use what they have, and then actually implement that into our processes and procedures and how we do business. Big part of how you can be successful. So I want to kind of close with one example and then 3 low-hanging fruit for those who don't have any money. But so people will say, give me an example of something that really happened, something that really, you deal with. Just less than a month ago, actually just over a month ago, we had this email sent. You probably can't see it in the back. My eyesight's not best, but I'll try. Your SOM mailbox, SOM is state of Michigan, so that's internal lingo, has exceeded its limit. Please click here to validate your mailbox. If it doesn't work, please copy and paste this into an address list. This was a spearfish. What's a spearfish? Spearfish means it's a phishing attempt. We all see the ones with the Flagstar Bank and Fifth Third and the professional. But this was directed somebody who knew exactly what the culture was in the state of Michigan. And they sent this with our lingo, and they sent this to a lot of people. Now you may think, well, no one's going to click on that, right? I don't have the numbers here actually in this slide, but I'll go back. We had over 2,000 people that was sent to. And we had, actually, maybe it is show the numbers. I'm sorry, I didn't include that slide. We had 145 people click. And of that, a large number of them sent information in. Sent in their passwords, their user account information. Thankfully, this was not sensitive, personal identifiable information. This was not credit cards. This was not Social Security numbers. But it was a very big warning sign to us. Our team found this very quickly. We blocked the IP addresses. They were right on it from the SOC. We ended up resetting a lot of passwords, and we ended up doing a lot of other work. But this kind of a thing is happening regularly in our state governments right now. Spearfish, Sands is saying, is like the #1 way that people are getting into networks, getting that credentials. That's the first phase of a multi-pronged approach to gain access to your sensitive data. So these are the kinds of things happening right now. And like I said, this is the slide. It's kind of fuzzy, but you can see if you clicked on the link, you got this. And even as you were typing, you may say, okay, I started typing it in. And as I'm typing, maybe I'm going to cancel out and hit the X at the top right-hand corner. Reality is it was actually capturing your keystrokes as you were typing them in. So the reality is you would have had that data transferred in. So I want to leave you. One question I get a lot from new CISOs and people around the country and state and local government is, Dan, this is all great. I appreciate the help, but I don't have any money. I've got no budget. I've got minimal support, maybe verbal support, but not real, What can I do? Well, I'd give these little three pieces of advice, in line with what the topic of our session this morning is. Start with the boats already leaving the dock. What I mean by that is every one of our states have major projects, whether it be HIPAA-related, health information, something related to Medicare, Medicaid, whether it be criminal justice, Secretary of State offices, whatever your top projects are, whatever those priorities are, wherever that money is, you should be in there talking to those people, because those systems need to be secure. And that's also where the priority is. So if you're working with those projects, then security can be, can be funded and can be a priority as you build it into that system. PCI compliance. I mean, Michigan started our journey in PCI compliance in 2006. The bar kept getting higher. At first, we kind of fought it, said this isn't fair. We don't really like PCI compliance. But the reality is now we've embraced it. And we actually use it to help drive a variety of different changes. And one of the nice things I think we've done in Michigan with this is our Department of Treasury is the leader in that. Not the security side, not the IT side of the house. They have a committee, and that committee is really pushing our agencies, because they own payment card industry. They own the credit card. You cannot be using credit cards in Michigan government if Treasury doesn't know about it. So they own the merchant bank relationship. So they drive it, and they've been pushing it. And that's been a big success for us to drive a whole variety of initiatives. And then lastly, leverage information technology, ITIL. A lot of the things we talk about in what we do is just really not just one-off, I got to plug security on top, I need to, after the project's done, stamp it on top, but building it into how you build your networks, how you do your response, how you do your morning day start call. And literally in Michigan, that's one of the things we do is every morning there's a day start call where the key people are on the phone. It's kind of like headline news for government around technology. What's up, what's down, what's hot, what do you got to do? And really building that in security, we use those same numbers for security incidents and making sure that people understand that this is part of their job and it's expected. So with that, I hand it off and get some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Nice job. Let's go to some open questions here. Anybody have any questions? Oh, come on. Nobody's got any questions. Young man down here in the front.
So, this is a question for Mark. So, Mark, you talked about the Cyber Fusion Center, and I guess my question is, does that encompass? You talked about all the things that it did. So, are we talking about state agencies and the private sector, information sharing, or are those two separate things?
It right now is the state sharing information out with the private sector. And we have talked to the private sector about the possibility of sharing information the other way.
So that's a CISO function, not a Homeland Security function. It's sharing stuff with external private sector.
Well, the state Homeland Security Director is the head of the Fusion Center. So that function is under them. But our Fusion Center came to us looking for cyber expertise. They don't have a cyber background. It was basically emergency management, law enforcement, fire protection. And so what we brought was the cyber component, and we work under their umbrella there.
So is that your staff or is it their staff?
The cyber people are my staff.
Good question. Mark.
For everybody up there, what percentage of the total budget do you have for security in your state?
I can start. So it's about 2% of our IT spend overall. That is about $10 million a year, approximately $500 million spend overall on IT. Again, one of the hardest things I find when you start talking percentages is what's in and what's out. So that's not system administrators that are administrating databases. That's dedicated cyber staff and dedicated cyber projects. We have a number of other security initiatives built into a number of other major system builds and projects that would not be included in that number. The other thing is we are having some special funding for some special projects around, like I mentioned, going 724 with the SOC, and we Governor set up a innovation fund for technology initiatives in Michigan, and so looking at some special projects over and above that. But the base spend in Michigan is 2% of IT, and I think as we look at the next couple of years and what we're going to be spending to improve where we're going, I think that's going to go up another percent probably. My guess is, we're not there yet, we're going to be up around 3% per year going forward for a couple years.
The state of Georgia being a federated model, I don't really have a handle on that. We're talking somewhere in the range of 140 agencies, each responsible for their own security, and their security numbers are generally wrapped up inside of their program budgets. The central function, which is what I had, the number I could tell you, but I don't think it'd mean much. It's basically a staff of 7, plus myself.
Just from the federal and DoD side, based on my experience, DoD is running between 2 and 3%, about 3.2 right now, and runs across to about up to 5% on the federal agency side. But I'll defer to Karen for the Texas answer.
Great question. can barely see you guys, so go, just stand up or something so I can see you. Go ahead.
Alex Lunsford with Teradata. A question, so Dan and Mark, you had two different models, more of a centralized model and then a fusion center model. I'm interested to see in other states that may not have done the work to create a centralized model or may not have yet, done the work to do a fusion model. What would you recommend to those states in terms of how to apply a proper cybersecurity overlay?
I'd have to say that you have to look at the way your state is governed and make your decision based on that. We looked at Georgia with a very strongly federated model of agency independence and started trying to figure out how best to support those agencies. We do have the authority to set policies and standards from a security perspective, but at the end of the day, we're looking to them to carry it out independently. And so that really drove the decision of how we did it. We couldn't re-engineer government, we have to line up to it.
Yeah, I'd say two comments. One, first of all, we do have a fusion center in Michigan as well, MIOC, which is really led by state police, and we are engaged in that. I didn't focus on that in my presentation, but we have many of the same, actually, similarities, and we only have one person in there now from our cyber side, CIO side, but they want to grow, and some of the same comments Mark made. They want to have more of our capability in there as well. So I see that growing. I would approach the question, in this way. I talked to several people last night at the reception about the same question, this issue. Is, what are you working on? And what a lot of states are trying to figure out, what is the agenda, what is the strategy? A lot of states I know are working on SANS top 20, critical controls, and saying, okay, where are we at? A baseline of where are we at? And then really looking at getting agreement. And again, I come from a centralized model. I'm not decentralized, but I'm just being transparent. If I was, I'm not in that role. I haven't been for a while because we've been centralized for a long time in Michigan. But I would say, okay, we're going to get agreement around who does what, roles and responsibilities, what are the key priorities around those SANS top 20, and then how are you going to administer that? So if it's, who's going to do the training? How's it going to be done? How are you going to measure it? So really, whether you're federated, whether you're centralized or whether you're decentralized, clear roles, responsibilities, clear roles of accountability, and then for example, there are a lot of tools that work very well with decentralized models around, we use, I just mentioned one vendor, we use Qualys for our scans, and we allow the individual system administrators, they're still within our Department of Information Technology, to scan the servers and scan different, situations. However, that's not under the Cybersecurity Office. So in a sense, that role is a role that's being done by other technology, people in the state. So I think that same model can work for decentralized, where you've got different people scanning servers across, maybe feeding a centralized compliance module to oversee things. So I think the key is, what are the functions, what are the roles, and then how are you measuring that? What's that dashboard look like to the governor, to the CIO? And then, are you showing progress? And who's actually doing those different specific functions, I think, is up for debate.
I could just build on some of the discussion based on my private sector and public sector experience. My sense is, when we look at risk and building a fusion center, we have to think about threat times vulnerability times the consequences. And so based on my experience as an intelligence officer when I was in the government, I look at what a foreign intelligence service can do. And so what Dan and Mark and Dave are talking about with thinking about physical and cybersecurity coming together, absolutely critical. It's not just about remote network access. It's about insider threat. It's about breaching physical layers as well as cyber layers. Beyond that, it's really thinking through what's important. Everything can't be important. And so from a situational awareness perspective, we better understand what's important to state government and identifying that as critical and providing additional protection, not just perimeter defenses, but additional layers of protection around that. And very importantly, I applaud what Dan is doing. I think New Jersey's doing this as well in terms of integrating corporate cyber threat analysts into a public sector function. The corporate world has been breached, continues to be breached. They learn every day from a business and profit perspective. If they don't fix it, they're out of business. So incorporating not just federal government resources and federal government threat sources, but also the best that you can find with regards to corporate threat analysts.
Thank you.
Good dialogue, guys. Questions?
Sean McSpade from the state of Oregon. I just had a question for the panel, probably in particular for Georgia and Michigan. You talked a bit about your involvement in Department of Homeland Security exercises like Cyberstorm, et cetera. Can you talk a bit about the role you believe the state CIO and the CISO can play on a day-to-day basis working with the state's emergency management organization and or the military department on these very issues to ensure that there's shared situational awareness of the status of critical infrastructure?
Yeah, I think very close relationship, and I'll tell you the journey we've had, in Michigan has been a very positive one in that regard. And going back to 2004, 2005, when the first Homeland Security grants came out, we very quickly realized if we were going to fund what we wanted to do in cybersecurity and raise the bar, we're going to have to get Homeland Security grants. And a lot of that has dried up now, but way back even a decade ago, that's how we got involved. That was where the money was. It kind of my analogy at the end, go to where the boats are leaving the dock. That was the boat leaving the dock. So we were involved in those emergency management exercises. We ran actually 30 projects over 4 years, got over $7 million in Homeland Security grants for cyber. So we were very engaged, very involved. The role of the CISO, before we merged DMB, Department of Management Budget, and MDIT, which is Michigan Department of Information Technology, into one department, I was the emergency management coordinator for MDIT. The guy that was on the DMB side now works for me. He's now for both. He was the physical side guy. So we absolutely attached at the hip with emergency management, their training, their whole strategy, FEMA, going through all the courses, the 100, 200 through 800 courses, all of that. Very engaged, and it's really helped us because that relationship with Homeland Security in Washington, one of the things we've been fortunate is, and I encourage other states to do this, a lot of times it's not money, but they want to run pilots and they're looking for states to pilot things. And so we piloted, we were the first state to do Einstein, which was a federal program. I mean, again, different types of federal Homeland Security initiatives, Department of Energy, same thing now. We're doing some cutting edge stuff with them. Utilizing those programs, and not always dollars, but working close with them, hand in hand, being involved in Cyberstorm, being involved in those exercises. Our teams are integrated. We work very closely. And I mean, I'll tell you, I think it's a core responsibility for CISOs and CIOs to be engaged as closely as they have and they can be, given time allotments and everything else that's a priority on their plate, to work on those issues.
I would say in Georgia, we're a little bit further behind timeline. We have not participated in the Cyberstorm drills. And part of it I would attribute to the fact that it is a federated model and it takes longer to coordinate. Our emergency management agency director is also our Homeland Security director. And he and the Guard and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the state CIO have been working together, and the Fusion Center, I think, is a big part of that. We're planning our second state-specific cyber drill at this time. We've done one internally already. And I would say that's the other thing is whatever environment you get into at a state, set your goals and make progress. When we first started talking about doing cyber drills, I frankly was afraid of them. And with the improvements we've made at the state, now it's a way of testing our improvements and finding out where we need to continue to make improvements. And our hope is that we're going to be ready to participate in the national drills here fairly soon.
Coming at it from the Texas perspective as well as the federal perspective, Texas has been involved with Cyberstorm for the last couple, 3 years. I certainly worked it at the federal level, and I think the key here, especially from a CISO's perspective, is to really change the mindset, especially as you get together with physical preparedness folks. And it really comes back to the prevention side, right? It's creating resilience before you have to react. It's too late. It's just too, I mean, you can respond to hurricanes and you can respond to natural disasters by going through a Stafford Act and FEMA procedures, but if you're not ahead of the game on the prevention side with resiliency, functional diversity, resiliency, private sector partners engaged, you're behind. And you're going to spend all of your time on forensics. So to me, the CISO provides that kind of mindset into the concept of emergency preparedness. And again, you've got different models here in different states for achieving that objective.
Let me just say one other quick thing. It's a real kind of a tidbit that might help. We learned along the way. I remember it was Cyberstorm 2, and we were stunned by some of the stuff that was thrown at us during this exercise. One of the biggest ones was extortion. We had a vendor they were simulating. I'm not going to say who the vendor was. They simulated, we were in the middle of this emergency, and the vendor wanted like, $30 million for a $2 million box. And it was like extortion. I was like, what the? We were not prepared for this at all. This is in the middle of a murder. But why I find that interesting is this. What's the number one threat that almost every one of the companies, McAfee, Symantec, others, called this last year? Ransomware. Ransomware. People taking control of your PC saying, I want money if I'll give you back control of the PC. A lot of different surveys. I know McAfee, Symantec, others have put that at the top of the list. That was 5 years ago, and I said, that's never going to happen. And now it's the number one threat listed by our security vendors. So just kind of interesting, gives you a little bit of insight. You do learn things in these exercises.
Great dialogue. By the way, this is your show. I'm just here. I'm just a joker. So you guys talk anytime you want to. Questions?
Somebody over here, Dave.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
I don't know if there's much of a question. Cybersecurity exercises definitely help, but you are going to get attacked. You are going to get breached. Everyone here has their response team, has a command center. One thing that has not come up today is how do you communicate? How do you communicate the crisis, whether it's to the other agencies, to the cabinet heads, to the governor, to the press, to the feds? You have to take email down because there's a problem. Now, how do you communicate with all your agencies? You have to really have a communication plan because it's going to happen.
It's only a matter of time, right?
Well,
What do you guys think?
I actually have to talk about how do you handle a breach at a conference on Monday. And one of the major pieces that you have to have is you have to have your communications plan, and it has to support contingencies. Again, going back to a federated model, when an agency is breached in Georgia, the agency handles the breach internally, and I said that didn't work real well. When I got to the state, as an indicator of how often this was occurring, one of the first things I created was a breach notification kit that we give to the agencies, and it explains to them, how do you handle communications, how do you handle the press, who needs to be informed beyond the state CISO that you've had an incident, how do you handle communications with the individuals who could be potentially impacted. In Georgia, the notification law doesn't cover most of the state agencies, but our governors have insisted we notify people so that they can protect themselves. So it isn't a question of, are you going to notify those people? So you're going to notify them. Let's figure out how you want to notify them, what are the words you want to put in there. The last part of it that becomes a real issue is if during your crisis the issue that you're suffering from is your communication infrastructure is down, now what do you do? And frankly, a lot of our agencies don't have a good answer. You know, it's well, if I can't use the internet, I'm basically dead. And so that's one of the things that goes into something else we do with our emergency management agency, and that is business continuity planning. All of our agencies are required to have business continuity plans, and the Georgia Technology Authority has a program where we provide planning tools, we provide training, but the agency is responsible for developing the business continuity plan, which includes how do they handle communications.
Yeah, so just kind of building off of the point and ensuring that we think about it in the sense of broad consequences. Communications is a key element in consequence management. So going back to that formula that I laid out earlier, you know, on the threat side, it's assessing intent and capability of different actors and working through the robust threat intelligence function that actually starts your communication function with internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. On the vulnerability side, we typically measure based on pen testing and other kinds of techniques, and that gives us a sense of, you know, what's important and how we're protecting against what's important and where the weaknesses are and what we do about it. On the consequence management side, I agree with Mark and with what has been said regarding it really is about your business continuity plan. And best practices in that space, especially in the corporate world, is to ensure regular practice and exercise of business continuity plans, both in terms of tabletop exercises and then working with your supply chain and your external stakeholders. I like to use in today's environment with the advanced persistent threat, you've got to work left of the bang and right of the bang. Once you know that you've got APT inside of your system, the networks are breached, you're beyond the vulnerability mitigation. You still have to do that, but you have to deal with consequence management. And that starts with DLP, but then goes all the way out into this area of consequence management that includes external, internal communications paths. What have you done in terms of activating resiliency paths? How do you want to balance between remediation and forensics as you go through this? And then how do you get the law enforcement guys involved with pursuit? And sometimes you think of it as sequential processes. They can't be. So I agree with you. You have to lay in that communications framework early on, practice it, and continue to exercise it as a continuous risk mitigation model.
There's one quick comment. Great answers. Just wholeheartedly agree with. I thought the session yesterday was outstanding. Yesterday morning, I learned a lot. We learned a lot. We in Michigan have a PIO. We call in Kurt almost immediately, and he kind of tells us when we can talk to the press and when he's going to talk to the press, when the governor's going to talk to the press or whatever. So, but that's a big part of our training and testing is, you know, the biggest thing. I remember during the power outage of 2003 in Michigan, the Northeast power outage, the number one thing was communication. In any emergency, and I learned this from emergency management pros that have been doing this a lot longer than I have, and they tell you that, you know, what you're really trying to do is win the hearts and minds of the citizens. Mm-hmm. And that's really what this is about. It's the hearts and minds of the citizens. You know, after the Boston bombing, you know, did the terrorists win, or did, you know, American society win? Did our leadership, you know, and winning and losing, but, you know, it's the hearts and minds and how you communicate, you know, after any emergency. And I'm still learning a lot. I learned a lot yesterday. I'm not an expert in the communication piece. One last thing, we're trying to do that communication now with our plan in that McDirt plan I mentioned, you know, with the public-private. It's hard. I mean, you know, how are we going to work with the private sector? Who's going to say what? And we don't know all the scenarios, but, you know, whether it's Detroit Water, Consumers Energy, Detroit Edison, a bank, you know, a hospital, you know, auto company. I don't know the scenario that might happen, but we're trying to put together a communication plan. And there's a lot of sticky issues in there that we don't know the answers to right now. And we've got lawyers looking at FOIA and open sunshine laws and other things. So, but it's a constant battle, and I think every organization says communication is their number one challenge.
Yeah, great dialogue. Let's get somebody over here. Somebody volunteer for me to make me pick you out.
Somebody in the middle.
7 minutes.
You got somebody in the middle.
Somebody in the middle. Oh, Mr. Ackley, how are you? By the way, before he asked this question, he told me before this, he said, now I'm going to ask a question about how security breaks the cloud. So let's see if he says anything about how security is going to break the cloud.
more proactive. I want to break the cloud.
Oh, you want to break the cloud?
You want to
Okay,
break the
I'm
You
sorry.
know,
Not really.
That's good.
Not really.
But so the question that I had is we're working to develop, a little bit more maturity here in Mexico is we've got a team of kind of the folks. I've been around and found the guys, who are working at command lines and said, you guys are going to be my response team, if you will, when we have some of these issues. But I was curious from the different models presented here, how do you handle incident response? Is it guidelines that you're giving in a federated environment to the agencies and then requiring a report back, or do you have like the Tiger team, or is it private sector that you're engaging at that point when you have issues? If you could comment on that.
I'll start, sure. So we deal with incidents each and every day. In our bat cave or in our SOC, we have a team of people that are looking at logs, they're looking at a wide variety of tools. I won't go into the technology right now, but whether it's we think a PC has been compromised and we need to take a series of actions, or whether we think it's something more serious than that, or whatever. We have a series of steps that we follow that involves our field service techs. We can block. We block devices and call it whack-a-mole, but there's some of that going on. Hopefully we do some things proactively too, and stopping a lot of those attacks. But if and when we do have an incident, and we've had several in the last, this year, we've had 2 major incidents that escalated, that got more and more people involved. It then can lead to us activating our technology emergency center, which we have call-in numbers, and then it could ultimately escalate. When we've never done this before just on technology, but we have in Cyberstorm and other exercises where it could lead to a state emergency operations center activation. So this is really the whole model around emergency management for cyber, and it could be incidents we deal with each and every day, prioritizing those, false alarms. We're talking last night at the reception about what's a false positive, what's not a false positive, how do you deal with false positives, and how do your teams do that, how do they get better at eliminating false positives. But we have incidents each and every day, and then some of them grow and some of them be bigger, and they have higher priority. And it's not just, it's the same system we use in Michigan, our ITIL thing I mentioned. It's the same system for cyber emergencies as if a host goes down, a mainframe crashes, we do something stupid like cutting a cable and we bring down, we've done it before, guilty, bring down an agency and they can't communicate because we cut the fiber or something. Same series, same process we use for those as we use for cyber emergencies.
Well, we're also an ITIL shop, and so a lot of things get kicked off through that process. But a lot of it comes down to how does an incident become identified? The agencies in Georgia run mostly independent IT shops. There is a consolidation of the large agencies that we're overseeing, but it still leaves over 100 agencies out. They're required to notify my office when there is a security incident that involves moderate or high impact information. We have a member of my team who leads the responses, and he pulls on staff. And then something that happened this year for the first time, which we were very, very pleased with, was an incident that was brought to us from the MSISAC. The MSISAC actually sent an away team to the state of Georgia to help clean up the incident, and that worked fantastic. Kudos to the MSISAC and the people that run that organization. They came in, spent 3 days in Georgia, and worked with my staff and the agency staff and got the incident cleaned up and got the foreign nation out of our state agency.
So just picking up on the question, I want to applaud Karen Robinson's efforts in Texas. I mean, I think using lots of experts from the private sector, the Texas SOC has really evolved. It starts with turning everything on, right? Turn all your logging on, and make sure that you've got procedures in place. As I've watched that model evolve in Texas, certainly I think it's been great. I also, had been involved with DHS and Mark Weatherford in particular as we were beginning to evolve, and his predecessor, Phil Rettinger, and evolving beyond traditional SOCs into NCIC today and what we're doing on incident response there. I'd say that the big push into the future is to be focused on spear phishing and SQL injections today, but as an APT moves, is to actually build a much more robust threat intelligence function to counter APT. The SOCs have got to get to that point.
Guys, before we the little numbers here start flashing red at me, this has been great. I mean, we could talk about security all day long. For all those guys out there, ladies and gentlemen here, what kind of parting thoughts would you give them? How could they improve, or what should they be looking at? Just what's on your mind? Looks like Mark, you're first. How about that?
That means I'll be done first.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I want to applaud what I saw Texas doing and Michigan doing. The one thing that I think we all need to focus on for the future is developing the staff that we need in the future that understands the cyber world, who understands these threats, the vulnerabilities, and who can help us in protecting things as we move forward. And it doesn't mean that we need them just in government. We need them in the private sector. I've spent the first 28 years of my career in the private sector, and I did a lot of security consulting. And when you talk about the issues that the states have, we're not unique. The private sector is suffering greatly. And a lot of it is finding the resources who understand how to write an application so that it doesn't get broken into, how to operate an infrastructure securely, how to identify threats, how to be an analyst. So my parting thing to you is, if anything in your state is going on that's supporting the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, or assorted other initiatives have been started, and you have a chance to support those, that's the future of your state, your country, your private industry, because this is an ongoing war. We see it every day. And you had your number. We're blocking 1.7 million attacks a day into 14 agencies. So if that doesn't raise something, if it doesn't get you thinking that we need to do a better job, because they're not doing 1.7 million a day and failing 100% of the time, or they wouldn't be doing it. So there's got to be some successes out there, and we've got to figure out how to stop them.
I would just mention, if it came down to one thing, the partnerships. I mean, I applaud people for being here in this session today, for your interest in this. And there's a lot of things you can do. We listed all those. But partnering with others, knowing what your colleagues, talk about MSISAC, talk about DHS, other states, working together at NASCIO, others. I mean, that's really, really important. Rely on your partners, know what they can do, build those partnerships, public-private sector.
Yeah, my only comment would be to lead and inspire. I mean, you may not be the greatest communicator. I certainly am, adequate, but not great. Find the lead at the board level on the corporate side, lead with the C-level suite, lead with the governor's office. Find the legislators, find out what their particular issues are, relate to them in their mission space, get them on board, and then do exactly what Dan and Mark have talked about.
Gentlemen, we're out of time. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, enjoy it. Yeah.
All right.